I'm going to debunk 10 Disney myths for you. Now, I love accuracy. In fact, when I wrote for the Disney Archives, I had to be accurate. In fact, I was very, very proud that I wrote up more than 700 articles for them, and each one had to be checked by Dave Smith, who was the founder of the Disney Archives. And in all my articles, he only found one mistake ever. It was kind of funny. It was Sammy the Way Out Seal, which is a Disney movie I was writing about. For some reason, I wrote Sammy the Way Out Sea Lion. I don't know where that came from. And the funny thing was Dave wrote back, and I don't know if he was just being nice, or a lot of times I would put humor into my articles, but he wrote back, I don't get the joke. So he didn't think I got it wrong. He thought it was intentional, which I thought was very flattering, but it was a mistake. But I'm going to tell you about 10 Disney myths. Now, where do these false facts come from? Sometimes it can come from interviews. I've interviewed so many people who have worked with Walt Disney, but sometimes they'll tell you things and you just know it's wrong. Not that they're necessarily lying. Sometimes they just don't remember correctly. I remember one lady, she was at the opening of Disneyland, and she was escorting actor Danny Thomas around that day, and she was telling me about it, and she told me how they went on the It's a Small World ride. And I went, wait, It's a Small World? That opened in 1966 in Disneyland, and Disneyland opened in 1955. So you know it's not right. She had no reason to lie or even embellish or anything. It just happens, but we can't just take anything anybody says as fact. The other thing is a lot of people who were there, who worked with Walt personally, who helped create the attractions and everything. Well, sometimes they'll tell stories, and the ones who are more in the public eye, you'll see the stories sometimes become a little more grand and become more embellished over time. I don't think it's intentional. I think it just kind of happens. But I've heard stories about how things were created, and then years later, it's kind of a different, bigger story and more entertaining for sure. But I'm going to stick to the facts here. I'm going to start with one that I remember from when I was a little kid, and I would ride the Haunted Mansion, and people told me that one of those singing statues inside the attraction was Walt Disney. And we had no internet or anything, so you just kind of believed what people said. I think a lot of the misinformation out there is from people just assuming things, and certainly back in those days, it, like I said, was hard to prove. But that statue that people think is Walt is actually Thurl Ravenscroft. I was a big fan of Thurl and all his work, and I helped him get a coveted Disney Legends Award, recognizing him as a Disney legend. His voice was all over Disney. It was in Disney movies, Lady and the Tramp. He's a part of a singing quartet of dogs, and he's Buff in the Country Bear Jamboree. You have heard his voices even outside of Disney. He sings You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch in the popular Christmas special. He sings some of the Sherman Brothers songs in Snoopy Come Home. He was the longtime voice of Tony the Tiger for Frosted Flakes.
Just to be here and receive the Disney Legend Award makes me feel great.
Now, people who know me know that I rant about this next one a lot, because there's a quote, "If you can dream it, you can do it," which might be Walt Disney's most famous quote, and yet he never said it. In fact, "If you can dream it, you can do it," which it says on this button, wasn't written until the 1980s. And if you could see on this, you could see the General Electric logo. You see, that's because it was written as a slogan for General Electric, not Disney. It was written by a lady named Sherilyn Silverstein, who I had the chance to talk to and learn the whole story. And there's also an Imagineer named Tom Fitzgerald who takes the credit for this because he produced an attraction in Epcot called Horizons, and that did use a loose version of the General Electric slogan, but that's because General Electric was the sponsor of the attraction. But if you can dream it, you can do it, like many of Walt's quotes, were just never said by him. Number 3 is Mortimer Mouse. A lot of people say that Mickey Mouse's original name was Mortimer, and that's just not true either. Now, it stems from a story, and Walt told it briefly in some interviews. He was coming back from New York on a train and coming up with this idea for a mouse and trying to come up with the name as well. And he was talking to his wife Lillian, and he said Mortimer, and she said no, or shook her head. And that was the extent of it. And from that, it has grown into a lot more. Interestingly, Disney did have a Mortimer mouse, and I did a video about that, so I hope you'll watch that video and learn a little bit more about that. Now, number 4 is one that I see all over the internet, which is Walt Disney was afraid of mice, and it's just not true. I guess it's ironic because if he was afraid of mice, his most famous character is a mouse, but it's not true. In fact, when Walt had a studio in Kansas City, years before Mickey Mouse, he had a mouse that was not exactly a pet. It started out as a wild mouse, but he just loved it and he would feed it and everything, and he became affectionate towards that mouse. He wasn't afraid of mice at all. He just loved animals and even the wild animals. Now, this one is really near and dear to my heart, and it involves the Disneyland Ambassador. Back in the 1960s, Disney came up with the idea for having a Disneyland Ambassador. Back then, the ambassador would represent Disneyland. She'd be the representative for all the cast members. And she would also represent Walt Disney himself and the studio and bring joy around the world, traveling around the world and also letting people know what's new at Disneyland and within the Walt Disney Company. Today, the Disneyland Ambassador program is still going on. It's changed a lot. Now they're more of a bridge between the cast members and the community. But the long-standing myth, and even the Disneyland ambassadors don't know this, officials at Disneyland and Disney don't know this. I don't know if anyone besides me and just a few small people who were involved know this, but they say that Julie Ream was the very first Disneyland ambassador. And here's some video of Julie with Walt Disney. You can see my friend Harriet Burns in that video too, sitting down there. But Julie was not the first Disneyland ambassador. I had the chance to talk to the very first ambassador. She was called Miss Disneyland. It was 1962. She passed away just months after I spoke to her, but she told me her story. And she was chosen to be a Miss Disneyland, and they called it ambassadress instead of ambassador. Her name was Valerie Watson, and this is an article in the Disneyland newspaper talking about Valerie becoming Disneyland's ambassadress. This is what started the program that's continuing today. And I have some photos of her complete with her Miss Disneyland sash. And there she is with some of the Disneyland characters of 1962. Then 2 years later, there was the second Miss Disneyland. That was 1964, and that was Carol Tully. Carol is a wonderful, dear friend of mine. And in fact, she has her Miss Disneyland sash, and she did travel around the world and has some fascinating stories about her time as Miss Disneyland. As Miss Disneyland, Carol traveled to London, Paris, Sweden, and even Lapland. She got to visit both Copenhagen and the New York World's Fair with Walt Disney himself. So Carol was Miss Disneyland 1964, and Julie Ream was chosen to be Miss Disneyland 1965. And I'll do a much longer video and go into more detail about this. But that one is Julie Ream, the first Disneyland ambassador? Not at all. I just wanted to interrupt for a second and say, if you love Disney history, please follow me and subscribe. I have all kinds of artwork and artifacts. This is one of the first Mickey dolls ever made, and it's an original, not a replica. Also, please leave me a comment. I love to read them. Well, Mickey and I thank you. Now back to the video. Now, myth number 6 is from Disneyland itself. When you go in the Opera House, and it's where Mr. Lincoln, Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln has played for many years, and now there's a show with an audio animatronics Walt Disney, a good show. But when you enter, there's a bench, and the bench is supposed to be the bench where Walt first thought up Disneyland. And there's a plaque on the bench that reads, "The actual park bench from the Griffith Park merry-go-round in Los Angeles, where Walt Disney first dreamed of Disneyland." Now this one stems from an interview that he did, and it's a pretty well-known interview. I saw it in my Disney orientation many years ago, and it's in a lot of documentaries. And it's Walt saying how Saturday was Daddy's Day, and he would spend Saturday with his daughters, and he would go to different places with them, and he would watch them on the merry-go-round. And as he sat on that bench, he thought there has to be a kind of a place that parents and adults can enjoy together.
So we'd start out and try to go someplace with, different things, and I take them to the merry-go-round, and I took them different places, and as I'd sit there while they rode the merry-go-round, did all these things, sit on a bench, eating peanuts, I felt that there should be something built, some kind of an amusement enterprise built where that the parents and the children could have fun together.
But for some reason, people just latched onto it as if he went to the merry-go-round, and there's that merry-go-round in Griffith Park, which was near the studio, and that's the bench that he sat on and dreamed up Disneyland. And I mean, he also stood on the floor in the Opera House where the bench is today, because that was inside Disneyland. But for some reason, they've kind of glorified it as that's the bench where he dreamt of Disneyland. Number 7, I've heard of for a long time that there was a basketball court inside the Matterhorn. And when I was working for Disney, I had the chance to walk through the Matterhorn. And it's actually kind of a funny story. The park was closed. I was doing something in the park, and there were some cast members there. And I said, can I walk through it? It was late at night. And they said, sure, just stay close to the track and you have fun. So I was walking through, and I don't know if other people weren't told that I was in there with my friend, and they turned out the lights, and it was so dark, we didn't know where we were going. I had my camera, as always, and I had a flash, and you could trigger the flash. So I would point it down, and I would just keep triggering it so that you would see a little bit of the track, and we could follow our way out. But anyways, that's just a side story. I did ask if I could see the famous basketball court, and they told me how to take an elevator up there, and we went there. And I was very surprised that the basketball court was simply a hoop. That's all it was. So would you say that there's a basketball court inside the Matterhorn? By all means, no. But yeah, there was a basketball hoop, and I'm sure people had a lot of fun shooting baskets there. Number 8 stemmed from an official Disneyland video. And on the video, they would have different fun facts that would just pop up in the middle of the video. So when they were showing Tom Sawyer Island, this came up. Tom Sawyer Island is officially annexed and recognized by the Missouri State Legislature. When Tom Sawyer Island opened in 1956, the governor of Missouri had written a letter which was read at the grand opening ceremony, and in it he joked that the island should be deeded to the state of Missouri. That's all it was. It was never more than that. And that must be where the rumor started. But I've heard it go even further, where people say that they're not allowed to sell any food or snacks on the island because they would be charged Missouri state tax, and that's too much for Disney to do. That's just not true. In fact, here's a picture that I took on Tom Sawyer Island back in the day when they were selling snacks on the island. Now, number 9, I kind of felt bad about something, so I thought I would put this in here. It's a Small World is one of my very favorite attractions. And I've known a lot of people who worked on the original attraction back in the 60s. And for some reason, Disney officially says that the opening date and the grand opening was May 28th. And it's just wrong. In fact, it can be proven wrong. I have some old newspapers I've seen that state that May 30th was the day of the grand opening. And even in footage, official footage of the grand opening, there's a banner above Main Street and it has a date on it, May 30th. Well, just recently on May 28th of this year, 2026, I saw a post of these cast members who were recreating the grand opening ceremonies of It's a Small World for the 60th anniversary. And that's because they thought it was May 28th because that's what Disney's official records say. But the truth of the matter is, it was May 30th. I'm sorry, people, if you were involved in it. But I hope you had a great time. It looked like a really, really nice rededication. Now, number 10 is personal to me, and it's about the Sherman Brothers. And they were Disney's wonderful songwriting team who wrote so many songs. You know their songs, Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, all the songs for Mary Poppins and Winnie the Pooh. And they wrote music for Jungle Book, and they wrote It's a Small World and There's a Great Big Beautiful Tomorrow. They did so much for Disney, and I got to know them. And Bob in particular was a really, really good friend. There's a tribute, which I'm hoping is temporary. It's at the Main Street Cinema in Disneyland. And on the wall, there are some lists, and it tells the songs that they wrote for Disney. And at the end of the theme park list, it says A Kiss Goodnight. Now, A Kiss Goodnight is a song that Richard Sherman wrote for a Disneyland fireworks spectacular. And Bob had nothing to do with the Kiss Goodnight song. He had passed away by the time it was written. They're separate people. They both were very talented. But the Kiss Goodnight song is not a Sherman Brothers song. And I'm going to go a little further because there's a new verse when you ride It's a Small World and you're in the finale. And it's lyrics that were written by Richard just before Richard passed away. And Bob was not involved with these lyrics at all. In a recent social media post that Disneyland did about the Small World 60th anniversary, I noticed a comment that somebody said she loves the third Sherman Brother verse. And it just bothers me because this is not a Sherman Brothers verse, because Richard was primarily the music person and Bob was primarily the lyrics person. And I know someone's going to tell me, no, Richard himself said they both did the words and the music. He did say that, and to a point it was true because they both collaborated and they may both suggest different things, but Richard was primarily the music person and Bob was primarily the lyrics person. And so the third verse is now in the finale of It's a Small World in the attraction, and it has really stripped Bob from the It's a Small World finale. So saying that this third verse is a Sherman Brothers song is a myth. That verse is not a Sherman Brothers collaboration any more than Bob's personal poetry would be Sherman Brothers poems. They're not. So there you go, 10 Disney myths, and I have a bunch more, so let me know if you're interested.